Have you ever stopped to notice your thoughts? I don't know about you, but as a metal music fan, I am almost constantly blasting metal music wherever I go, whether it's in the van when I'm driving for work, when I'm on my runs, when I'm at home, just any opportunity, I am putting music on and listening to metal albums. Or back in the day, I used to drink alcohol, and that clouded my mind, of course, getting drunk. Or more recently, I try to be more productive and I engage in doing tasks like cleaning, and then that usually distracts my mind. And there's like video games or watching movies or doom scrolling through social media. When's the last time you actually stopped and took proper notice of how your thoughts looked? If you were to go for a walk in nature without any music or any distractions, what do you think your thoughts would sound like? Would they be positive thoughts? Negative thoughts? Do you think they'd be helpful thoughts? Would you come up with some beneficial ideas, or would you mainly have negative thought patterns that would be detrimental to your health? In this video, I'm going to kind of talk about thoughts, noticing them, identifying the good ones, identifying the bad ones. In this video, I'm going to ask the question, what are thoughts? And can we identify the negative ones, the positive ones? Is there anything we can do to improve the quality of our thoughts, whether you can control your thoughts or not? And I'm going to talk about some techniques that I've learned to help maybe make my thoughts more positive or turn my negative thoughts into positive ones when I notice them. So, noticing your thoughts. So I first properly took notice of my thoughts when my girlfriend, now fiance, Albert, she tried to pay me a compliment back in sort of 2020 during COVID times. We were just having a chat. She tried to compliment me, and I remember having a flood of just automatic negative thoughts. For example, she might have, I can't remember exactly what the compliment was about, but I'll just make up an example. She was complimenting my music that I'd written. Maybe I'd written a new song, probably a song that ended up on our first album. And she was like, this is really great. You're a really good musician, or you're a great songwriter, or some kind of compliment. And immediately I would have thoughts like, oh, I'm not a musician. I'm not good enough at the guitar. There's so many musicians out there that are better than me or can write more interesting songs. These are the thoughts that are automatic, just pop into my head straight away. And in this moment, I noticed that I was observing my thoughts rather than directly experiencing my thoughts. And I had this degree of separation, and I realized that I am not my thoughts, and that my thoughts are something that happens in my brain. So I guess you could compare it to whatever the hell my liver is doing right now. It's doing some stuff. It's processing toxins. It's processing sugar. It's, doing whatever a liver does. That's just a process that's happening in my liver. I am not that process. Thoughts are a process that happens in my brain. I am not my thoughts. And this was the first time I had that kind of realization, and I am observing my thoughts. And I thought it was interesting. So I mentioned, oh, you just complimented me there, I said to Albert. And I had this immediate flood of thoughts that rejected your compliment. And I realized that in the past I would have spoken out loud, oh no, I'm terrible at guitar. And for the first time, I was able to actually just look at these thoughts. And I realized that my thoughts were a problem. They're problematic to me. They didn't serve me. They were not lifting me up. My own thoughts were putting me down. Other people weren't putting me down. I was putting myself down. And I realized that I had low self-esteem. And I felt like a certain veil had been lifted, and my identity had shifted back a stage. Instead of being so like interconnected with my thoughts and my emotions. I was now one step behind my thoughts, observing my thoughts and observing my emotional state. And when you're taking more of a back seat and just watching what's going on in your own head and what your emotions are doing, you can take a sort of third person view. You can almost look at it as though, imagine if someone else insulted another person in front of you. You'd be able to observe that situation objectively rather than subjectively. And so if somebody else told another person that they're a bad musician, they're terrible, I would think, oh, that's a nasty person. Why are they saying that? And so I kind of said that about my own thoughts. I was like, why are you thinking that about yourself? So if you are familiar with my band Kistvayan's music and our first album, the last track is called The Blind Observer. And I came up with the title of the song. I didn't come up with any of the lyrics. That was all Guy. He does all of our lyrics, but occasionally he lets me name a song, and I named this one The Blind Observer because after this shift in identity or perspective, I realized that I had been the observer the whole time, but I was blind to that fact because I was just clouded by being so emotionally involved with my thoughts, emotions. And I also referred to like the whole time that I would drown my thoughts with alcohol or music or just distractions in general. And I never allowed myself time to sit and notice my own thoughts. And so that's why I called my past self the blind observer. And that's where that title comes from. So with my newfound way of thinking, I'm not even sure what to call it. I don't see myself, the essence that I am, as my thoughts and emotions anymore. I'm beyond that. I'm above it or behind it, looking in on it. And so with this new perspective, I started to identify all of my different thoughts and the way that I was thinking about certain things. And I realized that like almost, I don't know what percentage of my thoughts are just uncontrolled, random thoughts that feel automatic, but I started to notice them. And my fiance suffers from anxiety, and sometimes she gets overwhelmed with lots of anxious thoughts. And I was looking up ways I could help her with her anxiety. And one way was to remind her that those thoughts will pass, just like a cloud will pass through the sky, and that she is the sky and the cloud is just passing through. So the thought is just passing through her. She is not the thought. It's just a thing that's happening and it will pass. And so I started looking at my own thoughts like that too. I never thought to do that because I didn't think I had anxiety. I don't think I do have anxiety, but I didn't apply that strategy to myself. And I now realize that I have thoughts too, and my thoughts are also just clouds passing through. I might get a bit nervous about something, or I might fall into a bit of a depressive mood. And now I'm able to identify that whatever it is I'm experiencing is a thought that's just passing through, and it will pass. I ask myself, how will I feel in 2 hours? How will I feel in a day's time, a month's time, a year's time? Whatever it is I'm experiencing right now will pass. Just like a cloud passes through the sky. And I noticed that some of my clouds were dark, some were normal, and some were really dark. And I identify these dark clouds as my demons. And this is where I'm going to try and make this topic a bit more metal by referring to my demons. And I hear about people that unfortunately lose their fight with their inner demons. And I never really realized what that meant. Not really. I mean, I knew that it meant that they suffered from mental health issues, but I didn't really get it. But now I realize a demon is just something that you struggle with personally, your personal demons. It could be anything. For me, I struggle with sugar. I eat so much sugar, and I shouldn't. I binge on sugar. So I have what I now call a sugar demon. And I am separating that issue from me. So I think language is very powerful. And if I say that I'm addicted to eating sugar, I'm kind of putting myself in a position of weakness, or like helplessness is more of an accurate term. I'm helpless because I'm addicted to sugar. And the implication by saying I'm addicted is, and there's nothing I can really do about it. But if I separate my sugar demon from me, now I can look at that as a separate entity and I can tell it to fuck off, basically. So it gives me more power, it empowers me, and I identified a bunch of demons that reside in my mind. These guys, they don't belong as part of me. They don't belong in my mind. They don't belong as my thoughts. They need to get out. So I'm exercising my demons slowly over time, and I've identified sugar demon. I've got a binge demon. No matter what it is, whether it's sugar or alcohol in the past or even energy drinks, I end up binging stuff. I can't just have one or two. I just have to eat the whole packet of biscuits, you know. So I try to say, no, that's my binge demon whispering in my ear, and I say, fuck off, binge demon. I have a frustration demon. I get easily frustrated, and I have to notice the thought. It's very fast. When I get frustrated, it's a very quick reaction to something, and I have to be quick to step in and say, no, that's frustration demon. And if I'm frustrated with somebody else, I can say that I'm frustrated as long as I don't act frustrated or angry towards them. I have a self-deprecation demon. There's an interview that I did with Heavy Metal Entertainment where you can see this very clearly. I keep putting myself and my band down in that interview, saying I was a terrible musician and blah, 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 blah. I have a rumination demon, so I think about negative things over and over and over again. That's a symptom of depression, and you get stuck thinking in the worry cycle or a depressive cycle. And yeah, I've identified a bunch of others. Personally, I wanted to know where these came from, so I've done work to kind of figure out where all of this stuff came from. And I went to some therapy. I went to talk therapy. I've done cognitive behavioral therapy. And it's pretty clear that, you know, there's events that happened in my life, which I made a video about, you know, the big negative events that have happened in my life and through my childhood. And it's clear to me now that all these demons kind of came about because they noticed a void in me, and they came in to try to fill that void, or they masqueraded as something that could fill that void. The void I'm talking about is the death of my mother, who passed away when I was 11 years old. And so, you know, eating sugar is something I did as a kid. I guess maybe now eating lots of sugar takes me back to when I was a child, before my mum died. Frustration demon. I mean, who wouldn't be angry and frustrated at the fact that their parent died when they were just a kid? But, you know, as an adult, it's now my responsibility not to let these demons take over. You have to take responsibility for your actions as an adult, no matter what the cause. And you can take responsibility for your actions, and you can still have compassion for yourself, self-compassion, and you can have empathy for the child that you once were, who went through those incredibly difficult things. And hey, maybe some of these demons actually served a purpose. They may have served you well in the short term when you first started. In my case, when I first started binge eating, or I first started acting snappy and angry and frustrated, it might have helped me get through school or something like that. But they no longer have a place in my adult life. There are things you cannot control, and that is the things that happen around you, what other people do. You know, whether someone in traffic cuts in front of you, I can't control what that person's doing, but I can control the way I react to what they do. And I would always used to beat my horn and rev my engine and how dare you cut up in front of me. And that doesn't serve me, actually. It doesn't serve me, or maybe the people in the car with me. for me to behave that way. What does serve me is to, unfortunately, as frustrating as it is, I still feel frustrated, is to just let it happen. Let them cut me up. Luckily, maybe I can compliment myself. I'm such a great driver that I was observant enough to notice that they were doing it, and I avoided a crash. So there's just a way you can flip that on its head to be more positive. These demons are temporary, and they are a parasite that cannot exist without the whole that is you. So just by logic, you are bigger than your demons. Your demon cannot exist without you, and so you can work to eliminate them. I'm going to quote a really random podcast that I was listening to. The podcast is called Frankie and the Goth, and it's from the YouTube channel Meditations of the Anxious Mind. And I think the Goth, I can't remember her name, she's just referred to as the Goth. She said there's nothing more brutal than facing your inner demons and winning. And I loved that quote, and I think it's so true. So on the other side of the same coin, instead of fighting your demons and overcoming your negative thoughts, you also need to identify when you have positive thoughts and then nurture those positive thoughts. Unfortunately, for modern humans, our brains are the same brains essentially as the ones that our ancient caveman ancestors had. And so it truly benefited them to be pretty on edge and anxious in case there was a saber-toothed tiger lurking behind that rock. So they had to have a brain that was looking for danger. And so negative information, negative news, negative thoughts are much more powerful, and they do stick with you and remain with you for longer periods of time than positive ones. So if you do nothing to sort of manage your thoughts, your head's going to slowly fill with negativity, because it's easier to remember negative stuff. And then misery loves company. So if there's somebody else that's a negative person, they're going to want to share their negative stuff with you. Think about your workspace. How much of the conversation is about negative stuff that's happened in the news, negative things about your work colleagues or your bosses or managers or the job in general? I bet a high percentage, maybe 3/4 of the things that you talk about at work are probably negative, especially being British. We just love a good moan and complain, and I know we might turn it into a joke or sarcasm and satire and stuff, but it's still a negative thing originally. So a positive thought, if you have one and you notice you have a positive thought, nurture it. Maybe you are a musician and you've written a riff, and the riff sounds really cool, and you're like, oh, that's a cool riff, I want to write that down. Once you've written it down, literally just take a moment to say, oh, I'm pretty good at writing riffs. Congratulate yourself. Why not? You do have to kind of make an active, conscious effort to practice recognizing your positive thoughts and then shining a light on them. And once you start doing it, you'll notice that there's actually a lot of positive stuff to be grateful for. So there's something me and my partner do every night now as part of our routine. When we've brushed our teeth, got into bed, lights are off. This was a technique I came across, again, to help my partner with her anxiety, but it also helps me too to just be more positive. And it is asking each other 3 questions. I ask her, what's one thing that made you smile today? And this engages your brain at night whilst you're trying to fall asleep. You know, the time when normally you hit your head on that pillow, and because you've been so distracted by your phone, by music, by tasks that you have to get done, by work, you've not had a single chance to process the day. And so when you hit your head on your pillow, that's when you get that wave, that tidal wave of negative thoughts. That's when they're all coming in, because that's the only time when you're not distracted. So by asking these questions at night, and if you don't have a partner, you can ask yourself these questions. Just think, what's one thing, just one tiny thing that made me smile today? And come up with the best thing that made you smile today, because then you'll be forced to think of several things that made you smile that day, and then you pick the best one. And then the next question is, what's one thing you were grateful for that day? Maybe you drive and maybe someone gestured and let you come out of a junction. It doesn't have to be anything massive, just these tiny things. And you think, oh, yeah, actually not everyone is a dickhead on the road. That one person, they did let me out, actually. I'm grateful for that. And then the last question is, what's one thing that you did that you're proud of? Or one thing that you did very well? And this one I used to find to be the more difficult one, especially because I have that self-deprecating demon. And so to just actively try to think in the opposite way to how I'm so used to thinking was actually kind of a fun challenge. And it's actually quite enjoyable to do. Maybe you cooked a meal for your family that day and they gave you a compliment for the food. They said it tasted great. Ask yourself that question and say, yeah, I think one thing I did well is I cooked that family meal really well and everyone seemed to enjoy it. That's it. And just do those 3 questions every day. I guarantee you will find an answer to each of those things, no matter how tiny it is. And if you can't think of anything that you're grateful for, just look at your own body. Have you got 2 legs? Can you walk on your own 2 legs? Have you got a hand that you can use? I had an injury a couple of weeks ago, just repetitive strain injury from driving, and I had my computer set up at a bad angle and my neck was in agony and my whole arm down to my little finger was like pins and needles. And then a few days later, I lost the ability to like grip with my little finger and ring finger on my left hand. This is my guitar playing hand. And I had a gig that weekend. And I thought, oh my God, what happens? What happens if, because I couldn't, I could play the guitar just about, but it was like impeding, is that the right word? My ability to play comfortably. And I suddenly thought, oh my God, I'm grateful for my hand. I've taken this hand for granted my whole life. And now I'm careful to sit straight in my van and not lean. And I've set my desk up so that everything is square. If you're struggling to think of something you're grateful for, it is as simple as the bed that you are lying in, the duvet that is keeping you warm. You don't have to think too hard about something to be grateful about. Another way to nurture positive thoughts is to set yourself a challenge at the beginning of your day to see how many positive things you can notice. Maybe just set yourself 3 positive things. I'm going to try and spot 3 positive things today. And so you've set your intention for the day. You'll be looking out for it. And again, it doesn't have to be massive things. You don't have to see somebody give £100 to a homeless person. You just have to see that when you were driving to work, there were several traffic lights that were on green and you weren't stuck in traffic. Because you wouldn't notice the green lights normally. You'd only notice the red ones because they're the ones that inhibit you from getting to work on time. And one final way that you can nurture positive thoughts is by, positive thoughts are very delicate. They're very fleeting. I'd say they're like butterflies more than clouds. One thing you can do with butterflies is catch them in nets and put them in those books, like the Victorians used to do. They go butterfly collecting. So you can do this with your positive thoughts by journaling. Just maybe keep a little journal by the side of your bed. And those 3 questions, you could write the answers to those 3 questions down. Write the actual action of writing helps to cement an idea in your head. Or maybe just continue to use the analogy of butterflies. I know that this channel is supposed to be bringing well-being and heavy metal together, and I'm talking about butterflies, but but you could use the analogy of the butterflies, that they live in your mind, and you have to feed them like you have to feed a Tamagotchi regularly. Otherwise, your Tamagotchi is going to be dead when you find it after you come home from school. One way to feed a positive thought is to talk about it as well, or write it down in a journal. So make sure you tell people your positive thoughts. They will genuinely be happy to hear your positive thoughts. And then you'll notice the effect that your positivity has on the people around you. And that will start to make you feel like your presence is appreciated more, and it might help alleviate a bit of social anxiety. I used to believe that I was a burden on my own friends and the people around me. And maybe that's because I was, because I was depressed and I just kept saying negative stuff all the time. It's hard to hear negativity all the time. So, as well as being positive or nurturing the positivity that already exists within you, you should also allow positivity in. So, when somebody does compliment you, you allow that compliment to sit with you and you just say, "Thank you very much. I'm glad you think that." Don't deflect the compliment. You don't need to say, "Oh no," if someone compliments your hair and you go, "Oh no, it's nothing. I woke up like this." Yeah. You don't need to say that. Just say thank you. You can also reframe the way that you say certain things. So this idea actually first came about when my ex actually noticed that I was first getting into running, and I was lying around and I didn't want to go for a run, and I was saying to her, "Oh, I suppose I'd better go for a run, otherwise I'm going to feel like crap." And she said, instead of saying, "I better go for a run, otherwise I'll feel like crap," why don't you say, "I should go for a run because when I'm finished, I'm going to feel brilliant." You're saying the same thing. You're going to do the same activity. By saying it positively, it just changes your outlook when you practice this regularly. And look, I know that this is not going to feel natural when you first try to do this. It's like anything really that you attempt to try, and on your first go, it's going to feel like awkward, and you're going to feel like you're rubbish at it. And that's because you've not done it before. You've been used to thinking negatively all this time, and you're really good at that. You're fantastic at that. This thinking and talking positively thing feels alien. This is one of the reasons I wanted to start this channel, because I think that metalheads in particular are fantastic at highlighting the negatives of the world, of the self in the music that they write and the music that they listen to. We metalheads can take an emotion like anger and make an entire album based on that emotion, or in my case, an emotion like depression, and I wrote a whole album about how that feels, and it connects with other people that suffer from depression all around the world. And you listen to that album and you think, "Oh, there's someone else that feels depressed like me. Oh, there's someone else that feels angry like I do." And that's brilliant, and that is magical because you feel less alone. And sometimes it is good to sit with an album that's like that and just experience that anger, that depression, whatever emotion it might be. Yeah, we metalheads, we're fantastic at that, but we're not good at then saying, "Okay, well now what? How do I move forward in a positive way?" When metal tries to be positive, you get bands like power metal bands or folk metal bands, or like the Iron Maidens and stuff like that, and it's all very fantastical. It's not based in reality. You go to a fantasy world and it's more like escapism. And there's not many that I can think of bands that deal with positivity that is also grounded and based in reality, and I don't know why. So that's why I wanted to make this channel, because I just kind of wanted to just inject some real grounded positivity into metal just by chatting about it, and hopefully sharing a few ideas that might help some of you guys. And by the way, it doesn't stop the negative side of all of these things being true. I mean, two things can be true at once. It's just you can either choose to look at the positive side or the negative side. One analogy I kind of randomly came up with, which I haven't written down, so bear with me, is if you're walking down the street and you're looking down at the floor, you're going to see old bits of chewing gum, you're going to see dog shit, you're going to see broken glass, you're going to see like dirt on the floor. You're not going to see it. You're going to have a negative experience if you walk along with your head looking down. But if you walk on that same street and you look up or straight ahead and slightly up, you're going to see the blue sky. You might see the tops of trees, or the buildings might be like cool looking old buildings or something that you wouldn't have noticed because you're looking down. And it's like that dirty chewing gum filled dog shitty floor is still there, it's still real, but you are choosing to look up and observe all of the other cool stuff that's also true, that is positive. And one last way that you can nurture positive thoughts is to find the silver lining in every situation. I challenge you, think of something negative that's happened in your life. I just challenge you to think of one tiny positive thing that came about as a result of that, because it's possible. I've actually done it to the most extreme way that I possibly could. So with the death of my mother, I've managed to find a silver lining, which is that had she not died, I wouldn't have gone through grief. I wouldn't be experiencing grief now as an adult, in my 30s. And therefore, the music I write would not be able to authentically capture that experience and that emotion in musical form. And so the silver lining is that out of the death of my mother came At Light's Demise, my band's first album, and it's something I'm so proud of and so happy that it exists. And it's a strange feeling to speak like this about the event of my mum dying, but why not? I mean, it's only me. I'm thinking about it. It helps me to think about things positively. Why should I be bogged down and feeling miserable and depressed every day 20 odd years later after she's passed away? It's okay to think. You don't have to tell anybody that you're thinking a positive silver lining about something negative that's happened. You can just think about it to yourself. So let's wrap this video up. I've got a positive thinking challenge for you. Think of a band that you hate or dislike. Now you might be thinking, well, Lee, that's not very positive, is it? Now bear with me. Think of a band you hate, and now think of 3 positive things about that band. So we metalheads, we're really good at going, oh, that band's crap, or they're emo, or whatever. That might be true. But what's also true is there's going to be 3 positive things about them. So I'll go first, right? There's a band I really hate is Parkway Drive. I think they're hugely overrated, really bland stadium rock or metal. Even the old metalcore stuff was like subpar metalcore compared to bands like Killswitch. And live, they rely on huge amounts of pyro and displays of fire to be remotely an interesting live band whatsoever. I really don't like them. It's not for me. Okay, so I'm going to try and name 3 things that are positive about them. They're probably a great gateway band for people that like stadium rock and metal, and someone into the lighter stuff might get into Parkway Drive, and then that leads them on to heavier stuff, and then we've gained a new metal fan in the world, and that's always a positive thing. The singer, Winston McCall, he actually seems like a really cool guy. I've seen a couple of interviews with him, and he just seems like a really wholesome guy who's just a really big fan of what he does and metal and stuff, and he seems really down to earth and humble. And even though I'm not a fan of the fire and the stunts that they do, that probably provides a really incredible experience for someone that does enjoy them. You know, not only do they do the pyro, but they do that thing where they enter the stage by walking through the crowd. You know, just they do cool stuff like that. And if you are a fan of Parkway Drive, it just really adds to the whole experience, and it must be cool for their fans. So there you go. I really hate Parkway Drive's music, but they're a band. They're good. I just named 3 positive things. Now you do the same down in the comments. I'd love to hear what you come up with. And notice how you feel after you have done this exercise. After you've thought of 3 positive things about a band that you hate. I don't know if you noticed, but I was smiling when I was talking about those 3 positive things about Parkway Drive. Why wouldn't I want to smile more, you know? So this is the end of a chapter on this channel. All my videos so far have been about kind of psychological hacks and mindsets, ways of thinking, just little tips, tools, tricks, etc. I'm going to move on in my next video to talk about, I'm not sure what order I'm going to do this in yet, so it might not be literally the next video, but I'll talk about dieting, exercise, how I went sober from alcohol. So there's plenty to look forward to on this channel. I just want to say, like, you've got this, just one step at a time, one day at a time. And remember, your music may be miserable, but you don't have to be. I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.